An orca could end a human life at any moment it chose to. It could close the distance before you ever reach the boat, hit with enough force to shatter bone, pull you under, and finish before anyone nearby had even registered what was happening. These animals routinely take down seals, sharks, dolphins, rays, fish, and whales far larger than any vehicle on the road. And yet, in the open ocean, people are almost never on the menu. This isn't because we're somehow too formidable to bother with. It isn't the result of some ancient truce between our two species. And there's no folklore, however tempting, about an orca sampling a swimmer, deciding the flavor wasn't worth it, and spreading the word through some invisible whale network. The real explanation is far stranger than any of that, and far more interesting. Orcas don't simply attack whatever looks like it might be food. They grow up inside a culture, a set of inherited habits about what counts as prey, how it should be pursued, and whether a new, unfamiliar creature is even worth the trouble of testing. A human being can be completely defenseless in the water and still never register as a meal. Let's work through why. Start with the animal itself, because the popular name, killer whale, is a little misleading. An orca isn't a whale in the sense that a blue whale or a humpback is. It's actually the largest species in the oceanic dolphin family, meaning it carries the speed, coordination, social depth, and sensory sophistication of a dolphin, except scaled up into a predator that can weigh several tons more than a family car. Full-grown males can stretch past 8 meters. Their teeth aren't built for delicate chewing, they're built for gripping and tearing. An orca can ram, drown, fling, or stun its prey with a strike of the tail, and when it's hunting alongside relatives, it can turn an escape attempt into little more than a formality. Orcas also live in nearly every ocean on the planet, and that enormous range creates a somewhat deceptive impression. People often say orcas will eat almost anything, and across the species as a whole, that's technically true. The combined prey list spans salmon, seals, rays, sharks, herring, penguins, dolphins, and full-grown whales. But no single orca carries that entire global menu around in its head. A population that specializes in fish will swim through the very same waters as a population that specializes in marine mammals without ever picking up the other's habits. The fish eaters chase salmon. The mammal hunters chase seals, porpoises, and whales. Groups that roam farther offshore may focus heavily on sharks and rays. These populations can overlap geographically while remaining entirely distinct in their calls, their social structures, their genetics, and their feeding style. Same ocean, completely different kitchen. This is the first real clue to the puzzle. Orca feeding habits are specialized down to the level of population, family, and sometimes even the individual. The animal is physically capable of eating an enormous range of things, but that capability is tightly governed by learned preference. No predator survives very long by test biting everything that moves. Survival comes from recognizing which targets are worth the effort and sticking to methods that have already proven successful. For orcas, those methods can be remarkably specific and remarkably refined. Some groups herd herring into a dense ball, flash the white of their bellies, release curtains of bubbles, and stun the fish with sharp tail slaps. Others generate waves deliberately timed to wash seals right off floating ice. Some patrol narrow coastal corridors, waiting for the exact moment sea lion pups enter the water. Some intentionally beach themselves to snatch prey off the sand, then twist their bodies and ride the returning surf back out, arguably the least elegant maneuver in the entire animal kingdom, but a highly effective one. None of these techniques is hardwired from birth. Calves watch. They tag along. They practice, sometimes clumsily, while adults handle prey in ways that seem almost designed to teach. Family groups pass these behaviors down across generations, and different groups can maintain entirely separate traditions even when an easier option is swimming nearby. This is what turns hunting into something closer to culture. In biology, culture doesn't require art, ceremony, or language. It simply means information that spreads socially rather than genetically. A newborn orca doesn't inherit a gene that tells it Chinook salmon, preferably the large ones. It inherits a body built for hunting, and it's then raised inside a family that teaches it exactly what to pursue and how. That distinction explains one of the strangest facts in orca ecology. A population can remain loyal to one narrow food source even when other options are readily available nearby. Southern resident killer whales, for instance, are intensely specialized fish eaters with a heavy dependence on salmon, while mammal-eating orcas living not far away thrive on seals and porpoises. When salmon stocks drop, the residents don't simply pivot to hunting seals instead, even though seals are right there. Hunting a seal demands a completely different rhythm of movement, a different level of silence, different group coordination, different timing, and different handling techniques than hunting a fish. Mammal hunting orcas often travel in near silence because marine mammals can hear their calls. Fish hunting orcas can afford to be far more vocal since salmon aren't exactly listening in on family conversations. Switching prey wouldn't just mean switching meals, it would mean rebuilding an entire inherited system of knowledge from scratch. The physical tools are there. The cultural knowledge isn't. Now place a human being inside that same system. From our point of view, the resemblance to familiar prey feels alarming. A person in a dark, wet suit, floating at the surface, can look vaguely seal-shaped when viewed from below. That resemblance has fueled the assumption that orcas should occasionally make the same kind of mistake sharks are sometimes accused of making. But an orca isn't inspecting you through a murky window the way a shark might. It's listening to you. Toothed whales rely on echolocation, sending out clicks and interpreting the returning echoes for information about distance, direction, movement, size, shape, and even internal structure. Studies of fish-eating killer whales show that echolocation sits at the very center of how they detect and track prey, and experiments suggest they can even tell different fish species apart purely by the differences in the returning echo. A human and a seal might create a roughly similar silhouette in poor light, but they do not produce the same acoustic signature at all. A seal has a different body shape, a different distribution of tissue, different lungs, a different swimming rhythm, and movement patterns built by millions of years of adapting to water. A human, by comparison, moves like a land animal doing its best in an environment it only started exploring after inventing a healthy amount of overconfidence. We splash. We kick with far less efficiency. We surface constantly for air, and we're frequently tethered to boards, boats, ropes, tanks, fins, or other gear that makes us look even less like a natural meal. An orca approaching a swimmer can gather more information in a few seconds than that swimmer will ever realize: sight, sound, echo, the presence of a vessel nearby, and a comparison against a lifetime of learned encounters with real prey. None of this makes a mistake impossible. It simply makes one far less likely than instinct alone would suggest. The comparison to sharks is useful here, but only with some care. Certain shark species investigate potential prey using their mouths, largely because they lack hands and depend on a very different sensory toolkit. That doesn't mean every shark bite is a case of mistaken identity, and it certainly doesn't mean sharks are simple creatures. It means their path from uncertainty to physical contact often runs directly through biting. Orcas work with a very different combination of vision, hearing, echolocation, social learning, and rehearsed technique. They can circle an unfamiliar animal, click at it, follow it, and compare it against experience before ever making contact. And when they do touch something unfamiliar, they're just as likely to nudge it with the snout or body as to sample it with the teeth. The teeth are available. They're simply not the first, or only, instrument in use. There is a small handful of ambiguous or non-fatal encounters between wild orcas and people on record. The most famous involved a surfer off California in 1972 who reported being bitten on the leg and required extensive medical treatment. A few other people have been bumped, briefly grabbed, or startled without ever being harmed further. What's conspicuously missing from the modern record is any confirmed pattern of wild orcas treating humans as routine prey. That absence carries more weight than any single anecdote. Orcas cross paths with divers, swimmers, surfers, paddlers, fishers, researchers, and the occasional person who's fallen overboard all over the world constantly. In some regions, they approach quite closely. They inspect. They follow. They may toy with equipment or create a moment a person will remember for the rest of their life. And then they leave. A predator that regularly takes down seals could kill a swimmer with almost no effort at all. If humans were genuinely recognized as ordinary prey, the historical record wouldn't consist of one well-known bite report scattered among a handful of unsettling but harmless encounters. It would contain repeated hunts, shared techniques passed down through families, and recognizable danger zones. None of that exists. Which brings us to the more interesting question: why has no hunting tradition ever taken shape? People have shared the water with orcas for thousands of years. Coastal communities fished, traveled, gathered shellfish, crossed channels, and occasionally capsized. Modern life has only added more exposure: surfing, scuba diving, whale-watching tours, naval exercises, and an enduring, slightly misplaced confidence that an inflatable kayak counts as a safety plan. The opportunity has clearly existed for a very long time. But opportunity by itself doesn't manufacture prey. There's a hidden assumption buried in the original question that an apex predator should be endlessly opportunistic, snapping up anything within reach. That's only partly true. Generalist feeders gain access to a wide variety of food sources, but specialists become extraordinarily efficient at a much smaller number of them. A family that knows precisely when salmon will move through a particular channel, or where seals tend to surface, or how a young whale behaves under pressure, wastes far less energy deliberating, because every hunter already knows the plan. Specialization also shields young orcas from costly trial and error. A calf copying its elders doesn't have to get hurt discovering which prey bites back, which one vanishes into the shallows, or which one simply isn't worth the chase. The menu comes preloaded with the safety instructions. This matters enormously in an environment where a failed hunt is genuinely expensive. Prey can vanish in 3 dimensions almost instantly. Visibility shifts by the minute. Currents can scatter a hunting group. A predator that keeps burning energy chasing unfamiliar targets risks losing the time it needs to find food it already understands how to catch. Being capable of improvisation is not the same thing as improvising constantly. In fact, real intelligence often expresses itself as selectivity rather than experimentation. For any new food source to work its way into a predator's diet, a fairly specific sequence usually has to unfold. The predator has to encounter it. It has to recognize it as something edible. It has to attempt a hunt and actually succeed. The payoff has to be worth the effort and the risk involved. And then, crucially, the behavior has to be repeated, and in a highly social species, it needs to spread through observation to the rest of the group. Humans appear to stall out early in that sequence, at almost every step. We're comparatively rare in open water next to established marine prey. Even along heavily trafficked coastlines, a seal-eating orca might encounter thousands of seals across a season, and only rarely cross paths with a lone swimmer far from any boat. Rare encounters give calves almost no chance to build a reliable method for hunting us. We're also wildly inconsistent, ecologically speaking. One day, we're beside a kayak. Another day, we're wrapped in a cloud of bubbles. Another, we're strapped to a board, wearing brightly colored fins, hauling metal tanks, emitting sonar pings, or surrounded by a fleet of boats. The same species keeps showing up in too many disguises and too many artificial contexts to ever settle into one clean prey template in an orca's mind. A harbor seal behaves like a harbor seal, day after day, season after season. Humans, from an orca's perspective, seem to show up dressed as equipment. Then there's the question of reward. It's often claimed that orcas simply avoid people because we taste bad or lack sufficient body fat. There's no real evidence for a collective dietary opinion of that kind. Nobody has run the necessary experiment, and nobody with any sense should volunteer to be the test subject. Still, the underlying economics of prey selection genuinely matter. Marine mammal specialists tend to target animals rich in fat, offering a predictable and substantial energy return. Young seals, for example, are calorie-dense packages built specifically to survive cold water. Large whales offer an enormous payoff, though capturing one requires dangerous, tightly coordinated group effort. Salmon specialists chase prey their families already know how to locate and process with minimal wasted motion. A human being, by contrast, is smaller than many marine mammals, comparatively lean, oddly shaped, and usually surrounded by objects that only add uncertainty to the equation. None of this makes human tissue inedible. It simply makes us an unfamiliar gamble when familiar, dependable meals already exist nearby. Predators don't sit around asking themselves whether something can theoretically be eaten. Through generations of selection and direct experience, they ask whether attacking a given target has actually paid off before. For orca families around the world, humans have apparently never delivered that first successful lesson. Risk sharpens this reluctance even further. Orcas are powerful, but they are not disposable animals. Females can live for decades. Calves need years of dedicated care. Reproduction is slow, and the accumulated knowledge held by older, experienced animals directly affects the survival odds of the whole family. An injury to a jaw, an eye, or a fin can hamper an orca's hunting ability for years afterward. All of that encourages real caution around anything novel. A strange, upright creature bobbing beside a loud, mechanical vessel might look weak and vulnerable in the water, but it's also consistently linked to boats, nets, hooks, engines, gunfire, and general disturbance. Various orca populations have experienced being shot at, captured, harassed, entangled in fishing gear, or caught in lethal conflict with the fishing industry. It's tempting to spin this into something dramatic. The idea that orcas somehow understand a human death would provoke retaliation. There's no solid evidence for a coordinated, worldwide strategy of that kind. An orca off the coast of Antarctica has no concept of maritime law. A calf born in Norwegian waters hasn't been briefed on the historical consequences of harming tourists. Different populations carry entirely different experiences, and plenty have approached people with no visible trace of fear at all. But individual whales absolutely can learn that vessels and humans come bundled with complications. That alone may be enough to explain the hesitation. Caution here doesn't require any grand philosophy about human power. It only requires one bad memory, one maternal warning passed down, or simply the total absence of any tradition that ever labeled us as food. And orca traditions, once established, tend to be remarkably conservative. This is really the hidden engine driving the entire phenomenon. Once a family specializes in a certain prey, every new generation inherits the same diet, follows the same routes, recognizes the same acoustic signatures, and practices the same capture techniques. Familiar prey becomes progressively easier to catch as accumulated knowledge builds up over generations. Unfamiliar prey stays unfamiliar precisely because nobody ever attacks it in the first place, and that gap only reinforces itself over time. No hunts targeting humans means no accumulated hunting technique. No technique means no experienced hunters. No experienced hunters means nothing for the next generation of calves to copy. In a very real sense, a behavior that never begins can be inherited almost as reliably as one that's fully established. None of this means orcas simply ignore us. Quite the opposite, they seem genuinely curious. Wild orcas have approached divers, nudged at cameras, tailed boats for long stretches, investigated dogs standing near the shoreline, and interacted with all sorts of objects for reasons that remain genuinely puzzling to researchers. One recent study documented dozens of cases in which wild killer whales offered prey items, fish and other small animals, directly to nearby humans, then lingered as if waiting to see how the person would respond. That behavior sits almost directly opposite to predation. The orca shows up with lunch, watches the human decline it, and presumably files the encounter under some internal category best translated as still confusing. Scientists don't fully understand why these offering behaviors happen. Theories range across play, exploration, social bonding, food-sharing instincts, hunting practice, or even attempts to provoke some kind of reaction. Calling them gifts, outright risks projecting a human motive the evidence can't actually support. But the underlying pattern still tells us something important. Orcas aren't failing to notice us. They're noticing us plenty and choosing to do something other than hunt. That contrast becomes especially vivid off the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, where a small population of orcas began repeatedly interacting with sailing vessels starting around 2020. These whales focused intensely on rudders, pushing them, biting them, sometimes damaging them badly enough that boats needed rescue or, in a few cases, sank outright. Headlines quickly labeled the behavior as attacks. Some commentators framed it as revenge. A few seemed almost ready to negotiate political terms with the whales involved. Researchers, unsurprisingly, have taken a more measured approach. The behavior is real, and it's genuinely dangerous for the sailors involved, but the underlying motive remains uncertain. Leading expert assessments point toward play, social learning spreading through the group, and simple fascination with a moving object that resists and reacts when struck. Crucially, the whales tend to target the vessel's steering system specifically, rather than the people aboard, and the overall pattern doesn't resemble predatory behavior at all. They don't isolate a person. They don't grab anyone who ends up in the water. Nobody has been consumed. Instead, the whales are engaging with an object that moves, resists, and changes its behavior in response to being struck, the very definition of an interesting toy to a highly intelligent, social predator. That distinction matters because an orca is perfectly capable of damaging something without any intention of eating it. Intelligence produces curiosity, play, frustration, and social trends just as readily as it produces hunting strategy. Humans engage violently with inanimate objects for entertainment too. We just call it golf, and we charge a membership fee for the privilege. The Iberian case also shows exactly how fast an orca tradition can spread once it starts. A handful of animals begin a new activity. Younger whales pick it up by observation. The behavior persists across seasons and locations, spreading the way any learned tradition would. This is precisely the kind of cultural process that could, in theory, give rise to an entirely new hunting practice over time. And yet, after hundreds of documented interactions with vessels, humans still haven't become the actual target. In a strange way, these whales are demonstrating both halves of the answer simultaneously. They clearly can invent new behaviors and pass them along quickly, and they still haven't invented us as prey. Now consider captivity, because this is where the tidy version of the story gets more uncomfortable. Orcas held in marine parks have injured and, in a small number of cases, killed people. Those events prove, beyond any doubt, that orcas possess the raw physical capability to direct lethal aggression at a human being. They also disprove any claim that orcas never harm people under any circumstances. But captive incidents don't demonstrate human predation. Captivity fundamentally alters everything about an orca's life: movement, social structure, control, daily stimulation, feeding routine, and constant close contact with people. An animal in that environment might lash out from aggression, frustration, redirected social conflict, overstimulation, play that escalates past the point of control, or motives that are simply impossible to reconstruct from the outside looking in. Killing a trainer doesn't mean the animal has suddenly recognized humans as food. A tiger that kills its keeper hasn't necessarily rewritten its species' natural hunting culture. It has killed its keeper, full stop, and the two things aren't the same category of event. This distinction matters because people tend to force orcas into one of two comforting extremes. Either they're gentle, mystical guardians of the sea who somehow intuit and respect the human soul, or they're black and white monsters simply waiting for the right moment to strike. They're neither. They're enormous, socially complex dolphins with specialized cultural traditions, distinct individual personalities, and the physical ability to kill animals many times our size without much difficulty. Their restraint around humans is genuinely remarkable, but it shouldn't be romanticized as some form of deliberate kindness. An orca doesn't need to feel any hostility toward you to injure you. It doesn't need to be hunting you to accidentally drown you. Curiosity from a multi-ton predator is still a situation best appreciated from a comfortable distance. There's also no guarantee this pattern will hold forever. Culture in orcas as in humans is stable, but it isn't frozen in place. These animals regularly adopt new foraging strategies. They've learned to strip fish directly from commercial fishing gear, exploit discarded catch, tail vessels for scraps, and pick up temporary behavioral trends that spread and later fade, almost like fashions. Environmental changes can push predators into contact with entirely new food sources. A single innovative individual can start a habit that eventually spreads through an entire population. In principle, some group somewhere could eventually learn that humans are genuinely vulnerable. What's remarkable is that despite an extraordinarily long history of contact, that particular tradition simply hasn't taken hold anywhere in the wild. That's likely the product of several overlapping barriers working together rather than any single, tidy explanation. Humans are relatively rare in the settings where hunts occur. We're acoustically distinct from familiar prey. We behave in ways that don't map onto normal prey behavior. We offer an uncertain energy payoff. We're closely associated with noisy, sometimes dangerous machinery. And most importantly of all, no established culture anywhere currently defines us as food. Take away any single barrier, and the rest still hold the line. This is exactly why the usual quick answers feel unsatisfying once you dig in. Orcas are just too intelligent to hurt us doesn't hold up, since plenty of highly intelligent predators still kill without hesitation. We taste bad has no supporting evidence whatsoever. They know we're dangerous, might explain some local caution, but it can't account for every population across the globe. They mistake us for seals and then reconsider, fails to explain why exploratory bites are so extraordinarily rare in the first place. The strongest explanation on the table is cultural prey recognition, reinforced by remarkably precise sensory perception, genuine ecological opportunity costs, and calculated risk. An orca doesn't open its mouth simply because something looks helpless. It opens its mouth because that something fits into a learned category, and the surrounding situation matches a hunting method the animal has actually practiced. Humans consistently fail to fit that mold. To an orca, a seal isn't just a dark shape near the surface. It's a fully known package of sound, movement, scent, location, seasonal timing, behavior, and expected payoff. The family already knows exactly where that seal likes to rest. It knows precisely how the seal tries to escape. It knows when to stay silent, where to strike, and how to share the results afterward. A human, by comparison, is essentially a question mark wrapped in fiberglass and neoprene. And questions, more often than not, get investigated rather than eaten. This also reshapes how we ought to think about intelligence in the first place. People tend to picture intelligence as a simple ladder, with basic reflex sitting at the bottom and human-style reasoning perched at the very top. Orcas complicate that picture considerably. Their intelligence isn't just an individual trait, it's deeply embedded in relationships. A given whale knows what its mother demonstrated, what its siblings practice, what its wider group communicates through calls, where its elders choose to travel, and which specific prey its culture has learned, generation after generation, to successfully transform into a meal. The individual mind is genuinely powerful on its own. The inherited library behind it is even more powerful still. In the end, humans have largely survived their encounters with Orcas not because of any special mercy, and not because of some silent agreement about human worth, but simply because we were never filed into the section of that inherited library marked as prey. There may be no conscious rule involved at all, no compassion, no recognition of human significance, only generation after generation of mothers quietly teaching their calves to chase something else entirely. And in the end, that's really the answer. Orcas don't hunt humans not because they lack the ability, but because predation was never just about raw capability in the first place. It's a tradition of attention, built and rebuilt across generations, a shared understanding of what matters, what pays off, what can be safely handled, and what a family has collectively decided counts as food. We entered the ocean physically outmatched and biologically defenseless. We may have looked available, but somehow we ended up outside the recipe. An orca could kill us. It simply never learned that it should.